The most striking feature of the current debate is that instability in Northern Ireland is no longer generated primarily by local actors, but by the turbulent political climate in Great Britain. For decades, the GFA insulated the region from mainland shocks. Reform UK now threatens to rupture that settlement, not by design, but through a mixture of constitutional illiteracy, populist improvisation, and a casual disregard for the delicate equilibrium between unionist and nationalist communities. Nigel Farage's proposal to renegotiate the GFA in order to facilitate withdrawal from the ECHR is emblematic of this. It shows little awareness of the treaty's status as an international agreement underpinned by concurrent referenda north and south of the border, or of the fact that the convention is woven through the fabric of the 1998 settlement. As Paul Lehman of the Northern Ireland Conservatives warned, Reform's attitude is cavalier. Northern Ireland will just have to wait while a Reform government pursues mainland priorities. That alone makes the party Reform a structural danger to the Union. A unionist project that treats Northern Ireland as peripheral is a contradiction in terms. There's a deeper point here. The GFA ended a 30-year conflict by balancing competing identities, creating institutions that require cross-community consent and embedding human rights standards into devolved governance. Strip out the ECHR and you reopen every line of constitutional argument that the agreement resolved. Hilary Benn is right to call this dangerously irresponsible. Farage's breezy claim that tidying up is needed betrays a limited grasp of the region's history. Nothing about Northern Ireland is tidied up with a pen stroke. Everything is contested and everything takes time. Unionists themselves recognise the danger. Jamie Bryson's comments about extremism becoming mainstream are revealing. Unionist parties are locked in a struggle with each other, competing for the hardline vote and advertising alliances with the radical right in Britain. But the more they align with Reform, the more they undermine the very institutions that shielded their community from demographic change. A power-sharing executive is unglamorous, but without it, the constitutional centre collapses and the gravitational pull towards Irish unity strengthens. The social backdrop makes this all the more volatile. The census shift is real. The Protestant community no longer forms a majority. Unionists feel besieged, and the political psychology of loss fuels defensive behaviour. Every cultural decision, dual language signs, council branding, even children's sport becomes symbolic warfare. Peace walls still stand, a reminder that resentment has never fully dissipated. The security threat is diminished, but no one who knows Northern Ireland believes the region is insulated from political shock. Old grievances lie just beneath the surface, waiting for a trigger. Reform UK is such a trigger. Not because the party has a working strategy for Northern Ireland, but because it does not. It's a vacuum. Farage's admission that Northern Ireland is deeply complex and will not be at the forefront of Reform's plans is treated by some unionists as honesty. In reality, it signals indifference. The region is only noticed when it obstructs a mainland agenda. This echoes the post-Brexit miscalculation of the DUP, who assumed that leaving the EU would harden the Irish border. Instead, Boris Johnson placed a trade border in the Irish Sea, weakening Northern Ireland's place in the Union and handing Sinn Féin one of the most significant advances in its century-long campaign. The rise of Reform would only intensify this cycle. Any attempt to withdraw the UK from the ECHR destabilises the GFA. Any attempt to renegotiate the agreement triggers Irish government intervention, EU scrutiny, and a constitutional confrontation that would make Brexit look straightforward. Sinn Féin's electoral strength, the demographic shift, and widespread nationalist confidence mean that destabilisation would not freeze Northern Ireland in place. It would accelerate the debate on a border pole. Claire Hanna is explicit on this point. If Farage could become Prime Minister, the case for preparing for a new constitutional future becomes more urgent. The electoral picture adds a further twist. Lucid Talk polling shows that reform would attract a significant minority of DUP and TUV voters. Under STV, this fragments unionism without necessarily reducing its seat count. But at Westminster, where elections are won by plurality, fragmentation would be fatal. Unionist seats would become vulnerable. A party that claims to defend the Union could therefore help deliver the first Westminster election in which unionism loses more ground than ever before. Reform's presence in Northern Ireland also reduces the chance of a unionist First Minister, widening the gap between Sinn Féin and the DUP and changing the complexion of the executive. All this is taking place at a time when anti-immigrant riots, mostly in Protestant districts, have erupted with a ferocity not seen since the worst disturbances in Great Britain. Imported culture war narratives, amplified by reform and elements of the conservative right, are being absorbed into local sectarian frameworks. The Israeli and Palestinian flags flying over rival districts show how quickly global conflicts become instruments of local rivalry. The irony is sharp. Optimists once imagined that Northern Ireland would become more like Britain, moderate, pluralist and stable. Instead, Britain is becoming more like Northern Ireland, polarised, grievance-driven and suspicious of compromise. Reform UK accelerates that trend. It promises simple answers in a place where simplicity is an illusion. The Union survives only when British governments act with care, consistency and constitutional responsibility. Reform UK offers none of these. Farage's casual talk of renegotiation, his indifference to Northern Ireland's status, his lack of strategic literacy pose the greatest threat to the Union since 2016. The danger is not violence, but political unravelling. The GFA is held together by trust. Reform UK treats that trust as expendable. In the end, the greatest threat to Northern Ireland doesn't come from dissident Republicans or militant loyalists, but from political adventurism in London, and that is why Paul Lehman's warning should be taken seriously. A party that forgets the obligations of a union cannot expect that union to endure.